So tonight, we've obviously got huge reactions from the college football playoff rankings release on Tuesday night. Let's get right into it because, listen, there were some things that changed up that are going to be really impactful for the playoff, obviously, not only for the teams that are trying to get into the playoff, but also matchups within teams that we already know are going to be in this college football playoff. Here's the top 25. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it right there. And as we know, once we get this late in the season, it doesn't really matter until you get to about 13, 14 right there. Those are the bubble teams that we've been talking about. So from 15 on in, you've got Utah at 15, Vandy at 14, Texas at 13. Miami is at 12. They continue to inch up. BYU at 11. Notre Dame, this is a big change. I think a massive change, and I'll get to why in a moment. But Notre Dame goes to number 10. Bama, somehow, after that performance against Auburn in the Iron Bowl, leapfrogs Notre Dame. Okay, I guess so. But Bama goes to 9. OU is at 8. A&M falls all the way down to number 7 after that loss to the Longhorns. Then it's Ole Miss at 6. Committee trying to, well, as I'll say later, maybe prop up a team that they feel bad for. Oregon's at 5. Tech is at 4. So they now are inside of that bubble line in terms of a bye in the college football playoff. And then Georgia 3, Indiana 2, Ohio State 1. Off the jump, I just have to tell you how excited I am for Saturday night. Big Ten championship game live on Fox. Gus, Jenny, and I are going to have the call. 8 p.m. Eastern is when it's going to get kicked off. Coverage starts at 6:30. 1 versus 2. We haven't had a 1 versus 2 conference championship game ever in the Big Ten. And we haven't had one in all of college football since all the way back to the Tebow-Bama days where we're getting Urban Meyer against Nick Saban in those Florida-Alabama matchups. I cannot wait for this one. I think it's going to be fantastic. Not only do we have the number 1 seed in the playoff on the line, we also have the Heisman Trophy on the line with Julian Sand and Fernando Mendoza going head-to-head. I think the best performance and the winner is likely going to win the Heisman Trophy and, again, get that number 1 seed. So I can't wait for that. That's at the top of these college football playoff rankings. But that's not what's interesting, and that's not what we're going to talk about here tonight. There are a few things that I want to get to. Let me just start with the most obvious, and that's Notre Dame falling to the 10 spot. And as we know, with these 2 spots with a group of 5 and an ACC, or 2 group of 5s, more on that in a bit, what we see now is that you've got to be inside of that 10 line in order to get an at-large spot and get included in the college football playoff. And that's obviously what Notre Dame is trying to do. That's what all these teams are trying to do. BYU, if they don't win this week in the Big 12 championship game. Miami, with a win over Notre Dame, is sitting there at number 12. Obviously, Texas has been politicking, rightly so, for their resume as a 9-3 with big wins, including that one last week on Friday against Texas A&M in a rivalry game. But Notre Dame going to 10 is massive. And I can just tell you right off the jump, when I saw that, I immediately thought to myself, Irish fans, Notre Dame fans, you should be nervous. Notre Dame should be very nervous about being on the 10 line right now because a lot of things are going to put them in a precarious spot. Let me just start with number 1. Why did Alabama jump them after an unconvincing win at 5-7 Auburn? I don't understand that. I don't understand it at all. You can't use, I guess it's resume, even though this committee the entire time has been using more of an eye test philosophy. I guess it's resume, but 5-7 Auburn with an interim head coach and a quarterback that they've gone back and forth with. Meanwhile, Bama needs a 4th down. I mean, I don't understand that. Now, they did it, and it has massive consequences because a lot of these teams, including Miami, don't have another game. So we've got all the data points that we want, that we need. Here it is. And so they moved to the 10 line, and now Miami has only BYU in between them and Notre Dame. And as we know, Miami has a head-to-head victory over Notre Dame. That should make them nervous. Then you've got the BYU conundrum. If BYU wins the Big 12 on Saturday over Texas Tech, they are almost assuredly going to jump in. They get the automatic spot, so they'll be in the playoffs. They'll jump inside of the top 10. And then the question is the number 4 team in the country, Texas Tech, going to fall all the way behind Notre Dame? Probably not. Probably not. I don't see them falling that far. Do you? I don't. And in particular, because we know the committee, now, even though last year's committee was a different makeup, don't you get the sense that they're going to honor conference championship games? Don't you get the sense that they're going to say like, okay, Texas Tech was an 11-1, not a 10-2. So at 11-2 with an extra data point, we're not going to penalize them and throw them out of the playoffs if they lose to BYU. I don't think that's the case. BYU's only loss up to this point is at Texas Tech. So if BYU wins, Texas Tech will not fall below Notre Dame. Thus, Notre Dame would be out. They would be out. There's no more data points. So if you're a Notre Dame fan, you have got to root hard for Texas Tech in that Big 12 championship game on Saturday. Here's the next thing. BYU loses. All right. You're like, oh, okay, sigh of relief. We avoid that whole conundrum with the Big 12. Yeah, but then, does BYU still stay above Miami? And in that case, I don't know. Now, would they be penalized for the extra data point? Unknown. But I think they would at least move down a spot, maybe two. Maybe Texas and Miami jump BYU. Guess what that presents? A side-to-side comparison with Miami and Notre Dame. And folks, you cannot unsee the head-to-head victory for Miami. You really can't. So now you see the predicament that Notre Dame is in. I don't know if there's a way that they can stay in. Honestly, because if you've got the resumes next to one another, they're similar. Record versus CFP top 25. Miami's 1-0. Guess what that one is? Notre Dame. Notre Dame, they're both 10-2. Obviously, the losses for Miami are not nearly as impressive as Notre Dame. And I understand and would agree that if we were to play that matchup on a neutral site this weekend, I would pick Notre Dame. They would be favored by, I've seen hypotheticals anywhere from 4.5 to 5.5. They would be 4.5 to 5.5 point favorites. I totally understand that. But we did see the game. Okay, so that's in the event of a BYU loss. And a BYU win, they're almost assuredly out. So I don't see a scenario where Notre Dame stays in the playoff. I think that they're in a precarious spot. And if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I would bet on Notre Dame falling out of the playoff. I know that that's wild. And maybe something drastic or different can happen. Maybe BYU won't be penalized and they'll remain a buffer between Miami and Notre Dame. Maybe that's the case. But boy, it's pretty easy and plausible to sit there and see where all of a sudden either BYU jumps them and Texas Tech doesn't fall outside, or BYU falls behind Miami and then they're in a direct comparison in a head-to-head matchup in which they lost to Miami. Because here's the thing. Every single tiebreak known to man starts with head-to-head. And I'll get to that in a little bit when we talk about criteria and everything like that. But I think it would be impossible for the committee to rank Miami behind Notre Dame in a direct fashion right next to them, even though I think Notre Dame would beat Miami this weekend. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.